Greetings, friends. My name is Pavel Stelmach, and I'm glad to present for you the new episode of our daily wrap-up series. In a few hours at 4 a.m. Kyiv time, it will be exactly 10 months that our entire country has been living in a full-scale war. For 10 months, the insidious enemy has been shelling our territory with cruise and ballistic missiles, mines of various calibers. Military equipment is driving on our land, and our coordinates are being entered into the control centers of missile complexes thousands of kilometers away. Ukrainians have been living in alarm for 10 months, both in the air and internally, and we are simply losing people at the front and in the occupied territories. People who could live a normal civilian life, planned their future, but now think only about how to destroy the enemy.
Вони ведуть війну і витрачають життя людей і інших людей, не своїх близьких.
They wage war and waste people's lives, other people's lives, not of their loved ones, not their own lives, but the lives of the others only because a group in the Kremlin can't admit mistakes and is terribly afraid of reality, but reality speaks for itself.
Indeed, after 10 months of war, Moscow still believes that they will be able to win the war, or at least seize some Ukrainian territory. They hope, as always, for the number of soldiers. The day before, Russian Defense Minister Shoigu said that it is necessary to increase the number of the Russian armed forces to 1.5 million people, including contract servicemen. Putin supported this. In addition, the minister proposes to change the conscription age not from 18 to 27, but from 20 to 29. Do you know why? Because the birth rate in the aggressor country is falling every year, and there are simply more men under the age of 29 than younger ones. However, it is not yet known exactly how new soldiers will be recruited. After all, the mobilization in the country seems to have already ended, and Putin himself said that there will be no more. After all, due to the previous process, about 700,000 people left the country. If they start a new stage of mobilization, conscription, or whatever they want to call it, it will lead to a new wave of immigration and possibly internal protests.
Whenever they talk about the proportionality of the resource with Ukraine, then Putin and Shoigu say that they have a mobilization reserve many times higher than in Ukraine, and therefore they can afford it. Military thought in Moscow since 1945 has not changed. Still, the task is, for example, to take the nearest hill without being guided by the number of losses. It doesn't matter how many losses, the woman will birth more.
However, Russia's plans will most likely not come true, according to the Institute for the Study of War Research. After all, Moscow was unable to fully equip brigades and regiments before the full-scale invasion and did not fully build a new division, the formation of which was announced as early as 2020. What's more, the Russians could not even properly provide for the mobilized in the fall. The Russian economy is currently in recession, and its resources have been greatly depleted since the full-scale invasion. The training potential of the Russian Federation has also decreased since February the 24th because many instructors have already died in Ukraine.
The Russian battalion tactical group concept, for a decade the pride of their military doctrine, has not stood up to Ukrainian resistance. Russia's deployed land forces' combat effectiveness has dropped by more than 50%. The Russian Air Force is conducting tens of millions per day as opposed to 30 per day back in March. And Russia's much-wanted Black Sea Fleet is little more than a coastal defensive flotilla. Kremlin paid mercenaries and faring no better. Hundreds were killed by a recent strike on a headquarters used by paramilitary Wagner Group in the Luhansk region. Ben Wallace, the Defensive Secretary, in the statement to the British Parliament.
Therefore, after 10 months of the war, we live in Ukraine and believe even more in our victory. After all, nothing is impossible if we will fight. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we could only dream of getting new artillery. Allies were afraid to provide it. But we fought, and in a few months we began to receive it. The same with air defense equipment. In the spring, we asked to close the sky, and now we are receiving new complexes. And on the way, there is also a patriot. Because we are fighting, the armed forces are fighting. The whole nation works for victory. However, while the Ukrainian nation is working for victory, the war changed not only life in Ukraine, but also the whole of Europe and even the whole world. Diplomats, opinion leaders, and journalists are talking about this now. The Times wrote about how life changed as a result of the war in Britain, and I would like to dwell in more detail on the conclusions reached by the British colleagues. In particular, the Russian-Ukrainian war demonstrated the weakness of Russia and Putin. And this is certainly the biggest change in the modern world order. After all, until February, Russia was a business partner for many countries. Russia sought energy resources, minerals, and diamonds. At the same time, it was a country with a supposedly strong army. It was rated as the second strongest in the world. At the same time, parades and demonstrations performances showed great potential. But the Ukrainian military showed that all this equipment is possibly modern, but it is not used in their best way. At the same time, the presence of the red button and the futility of the started war brought back the fear of nuclear war. Moreover, if Putin and Russia are not punished for this full scale attack, it can become an example for other countries, and the Taiwan conflict can be escalated to military means. Among other things, the Russian Ukrainian war gave an idea of what future wars will be like. On the one hand, this war showed the importance of modern technologies such as satellite internet and drones. On the other, it turned out to be surprisingly old fashioned with its trench warfare and artillery duels. For example, near the city of Bakhmut, fighting has been going on for more than 6 months there.
Bakhmut is an indomitable eastern fortress of Ukraine, and Bakhmut doesn't just hold on, and the Russians cannot enter here. They're getting huge losses. They're trying to surround the city, but the Ukrainian armed forces do not allow them to do so, and our brave warriors are not just standing firm here. Yes, it's a big price we pay, but ours do not give up, and Bakhmut is a Ukrainian city. We all have one wish today: a quick victory, and for everyone to return alive and well.
However, in military it changed a lot. First of all, it strengthened NATO. After all, this year the defense ministers met only 7 times in the Ramstein format, and in January they will meet for the 8th time. The Ukrainian war also brought incredible benefits to arm manufacturers. On the one hand, the governments of various countries are buying weapons and equipment in order to transfer them to Ukraine. On the other hand, state defense spending has increased many times. Moreover, the Russian-Ukrainian war now allows you to test the equipment in real, not simulated or training conditions. This immediately shows how useful this or that technique is on the battlefield and not in the exhibition pavilion. And the war ended the military taboo in Germany and Japan. Countries that relied on defense doctrine after the Second World War will now invest money in offensive weapons and in general will also increase their spending.
I use the facts as a guide, and when I see, for example, that in 2015, the year after Crimea was attacked, almost 300 million were invested in ammunition, and we are now investing around 900 million, then based on the figures, it is very clear growth. I orientate myself on that and not on any statement that want to grow interest to one direction or the other. It's about the facts. It's about the fact that savings have been made for years, and now there are gaps that need to be filled as quickly as possible. Minister of Defense of Germany, Christine Lambrecht, in an interview with Deutschlandfunk.
The war, as usual, primarily affects civilian life. For example, inflation increased in Europe, and the number of strikes increased as a result too. And people began to think more about green technologies and nuclear energy. After all, fossil energy resources, especially which countries use to attack their neighbors with, are not the best way to invest. However, in some countries of Africa and Asia, the problems are even greater. The war could lead to famine, because grain from Ukraine was one of the main imported goods in these territories. Russia's life has also changed. Even greater repressions began there if a person does not support the government. About 700,000 people simply left the country due to possible mobilization. Therefore, a new Russian diaspora appeared in the world, similar to the one that appeared after the Bolsheviks came to power in 1917. At the same time, the fields of sport, science and art, which continue to support the Kremlin, at times ties have broken there. But whose lives changed the most, if not Ukrainians? More than 14 million of our compatriots were forced to leave their homes because of the war. That's a third of the population. The war literally and figuratively destroyed the homes and lives of many Ukrainians. However, this war also brought something positive. It strengthened the Ukrainian national identity. Now being called a Ukrainian sounds proud, prestigious and brave. It is not for nothing that more people are looking for their roots. And in this regard, we have a very apt belief, our flower around the world. Tomorrow night, most Christians of the world will celebrate the biggest holiday of a year, Christmas Eve, a holiday that everyone associates with something of their own, but everyone definitely has something from the list. family, warmth, coziness, gifts, the new year. Christmas coincides on the astronomical longest night in the northern hemisphere, and in this way, the two realms are combined, religious and scientific. After all, now the light day will only get longer, as will the joy of life after the birth of Jesus. Therefore, Christmas brings both solar and spiritual light.
We will celebrate Christmas, maybe candlelit. Not because it's more romantic, no, but because there will be no electricity. Millions won't have neither heating nor running water. All of these will be the result of Russian missile and drone attacks on our energy infrastructure. But we do not complain. We do not judge and compare whose life is easier. Your well-being is the product of your national security, the result of your struggle for independence and your many victories. We, Ukrainians, will also go through our war of independence and freedom with dignity and success. We'll celebrate Christmas. Celebrate Christmas, and even if there is no electricity, the light of our faith in ourselves will not be put out.
However, this year, Ukrainian Christmas is changing not only because of the war. In recent years, there has been a debate in the country about the date of the celebration. After all, during the last year, we celebrated the birth of Christ on January the 7th. However, every year, more and more Ukrainians celebrate December the 25th, and there are several reasons for that. Of course, the biggest one is the desire to move away from Russia as much as possible. Moscow churchmen have been trying to influence the Ukrainian religion for a very long time, and that is why today the people want to do everything to differentiate themselves from the Russians as much as possible. And to celebrate Christmas after the New Year is illogical, because according to Christian tradition, there should be a fast before Christmas, and therefore the New Year's table should be modest. But if you celebrate in December, it will be more fun to celebrate the New Year. Moreover, the transition to the Western tradition is supported by more and more Ukrainians. According to the latest polls, almost half of Christians in Ukraine.
Extend my heartfelt congratulations to you on the occasion of the upcoming Christmas and New Year. We often recall the saying, in the dark times, bright people are clearly visible. I thank you for your support and assistance. I am grateful to you for being together with us in this tough, unjust and unjustified war. I am grateful to you on behalf of every Ukrainian soldier in whose hands your weapon eliminates the world's evil and saves innocent lives. The price of peace is extremely high. Recall this while looking at the sky and the Christmas star in it. Pray for Ukrainian warrior who is in the trenches, now protecting the world from harm, and believe that God is right there, next to him, on the side of good, the truth and fairness.
This year, Ukrainians will celebrate Christmas differently than usual. Maybe in bomb shelters, maybe without lights, some far from away their friends and relatives. But do you know, such a separation brings us even closer together, because after such family holidays far from each other, you begin to appreciate the people around you even more. And Christmas as a holiday of faith and light increases our faith in victory over all the evil in the world. And we know that we will definitely win. And in the meantime, I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. That concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for future videos. Goodbye.